everyone, and welcome to another Payload Space webinar. Today, we're talking about the transformation of sales and marketing in the space industry. I'm Brian, Director of Client Partnerships here, and I'll be moderating this great conversation. As always, with Payload webinars, we encourage audience participation. So if you have a question, drop it in the chat. And then if we don't get to it in real time, we'll be sure to address them during the Q&A towards the end of the session. I'm joined by some incredible marketing minds in the space industry. And hopefully we'll start with the easiest question we'll have today, introductions. So Lynn, why don't we start with you?
Hey everyone, thanks for having me today, Brian. I'm Lynn Chassagne. I lead customer experience and marketing at Blacksky. And if you're not familiar with Blacksky, we're a space-based intelligence company. So we deliver industry-leading real-time satellite imagery, analytics, and high-frequency monitoring over the most strategic locations in the world, economic assets, and we monitor events around the globe.
Awesome. Keryce?
Hey everyone. Thanks so much for inviting me today, Brian. I'm Keryce Henry, Director of Marketing at Astroscale US. We were founded to secure the safe and sustainable use of space for future generations. Most people might know us as a space trash company because we were founded to address the space debris issue. But what we're working toward is a much larger shift in how we're operating in space through on-orbit servicing. So really excited to be here today and talk a little bit about our marketing strategies.
Awesome. Katie?
Hey everyone, I'm Kati Tolomei. I lead marketing at Loft Orbital. We are a space infrastructure company, which means we let any company, organization, government institution really harness the power of space by flying a variety of different missions. So whether that's physical missions or virtual missions, we are providing that fast and simple way to get to and use space.
Perfect. And then Martin, why don't we end it with you?
Hi, I'm Martin, the founder, CEO, and CAIO-CTO of Pluto 5000. Our vision is to give companies an AI business OS that maximizes long-term growth. We're starting by building a company-owned AI brain that unifies your company's sales, marketing, and customer success efforts. This evolving company-owned AI brain actually manages a team of AI agents that then creates high-touch, delightful experiences for each user that comes to your website, grounded in user privacy and data ownership. And if it's not already obvious, I am a socially awkward Star Trek nerd, and that has always had a hard time communicating what I've built. And so I basically built an AI platform that helps me do that. And of course, I really like space. And I think it's the biggest market ever that there will be, and really excited to be on this panel. Thank you, Payload, and everyone else for joining.
Yeah, and thank you, Pluto 5000, for sponsoring. Be sure to check them out and shoot Martin a note after this webinar. Okay, so getting into kind of like general space marketing industry trends, I think kind of to set the stage, something that really interests me. I joined Payload about a little less than 2 years ago, and I think, space, huge contracts, right? Like marketing must be such a key focus, and companies spending plenty of money on it. And I think something I've learned is that, despite, the large contracts and large operational expenses that go into space companies, marketing has, historically taken a backseat, for a nice word, towards that. So, I'm curious to hear from the panelists how you're approaching marketing, given, you're typically under-resourced, and, in these current market conditions, how you're approaching that. So Lynn, I'll let you kind of kick us off there.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I think when I think about marketing in this industry, even 15 or 20 years ago, there was a huge desire to have space companies be household names. And I would say most, if not all, space companies are not resourced to actually build sort of the brand advocacy that they need to around being a household name, a la like Super Bowl commercials, right? So we've moved pretty far from that, and that's a great thing. And so one of the things that we focus on, which is way more targeted, is ABM. So when we do account-based marketing, we're really able to like focus intently on reaching specific customers, because at least in our case, it's not like we have millions of high dollar potential buyers. We have the opportunity to create sort of these really targeted, curated experiences for maybe 5 or 10 customers or prospects, which then helps close the gap with teams that are not funded to really go find hundreds or even thousands of customers.
Yeah. And curious, you guys recently went public. Your space debris is kind of hot in the streets. Curious how you're kind of approaching, building momentum off of that, but also, kind of to Lynn's point, approaching, account-based marketing and get really targeted.
Yeah, that's a great question. And to your point, especially at this particular time in the company. So in terms of our underlying strategy, how we're accounting for resources and attracting both a broader audience, but then a very specific customers with a similar approach, like what Lynn mentioned, is having a really informed structure. That's kind of our North Star for our strategy. So our marketing team has been in lockstep with business development to build out our funnel, which is how we're starting off with our broader audience and aligned on what are all the conversion points that get a prospect all the way through the funnel to purchase stage. And then also what we call the flywheel. So how we're keeping our customer in our ecosystem once they've signed a contract. So they're a fan of Astroscale, they talk about us on our behalf, and they work with us again. And so having this very informed structure that we can iterate on allows us to be creative with our content and activities. So when we have a major shift like going public, and that requires a shift in our messaging, a shift in our stakeholders, we still kind of have this structured framework to operate off of. So everything that we do is in lockstep with the campaign. So having that structure and investing time in building that structure has been a huge benefit for us.
Yeah, definitely. And then Katie, maybe uniquely, right? You guys just recently went through a rebrand. And so talking about how you guys thought about that rebrand and then how it shaped, your future marketing plans, if anything has changed besides, the website and the logo.
Oh, yeah. So I think, space companies are consistently evolving. The point that Keryce made about just how you are kind of constantly thinking about what those big moments are for the company, I think plays a huge role in your strategy. You only have a certain amount of arrows in your quiver, I think. And so thinking about how you use those really informs your strategy. And I saw a great piece talking about how strategy is kind of painful, right? Because you decide on what is really most important to you. And that way you can really put the most energy behind it. And so once you have that strategy in place, then you're able to kind of create that budget. And in a traditionally resource constrained industry like the space industry, I would argue that actually creates a lot more room for creativity. And by creativity, I think when you're saying, okay, I don't have the budget to create this big multi-digit production or work with this production company, what else can I do? Is that manifest in like a reel? Where's my audience actually, an Instagram reel, for example, or where is my audience actually spending their time? And what is going to be a most effective way in reaching them, especially when you have that smaller, more targeted audience, I think is something that we are really starting to explore at Loft. And I think budget is important, but I don't think it's the end all be all of what drives your strategy forward. And so I think the big challenge that we have is space is something that resonates with so many people and has kind of this emotional touch point for people. How do you capitalize on that as a marketer? And how do you create kind of the content that makes people think a little bit more thoughtfully about space? And that's actually kind of what drove our brand refresh or our rebrand forward. We didn't change our name. We just updated our look and feel to make it feel a little bit more like the company it represented. And this is where also I say your brand is not just your visual identity. Your brand is everything that you do. And so whether that's how somebody interacts with your sales team or somebody working at your booth at a conference, to how somebody gets excited about a pair of socks that you give out. If you want a pair of socks, let me know. Or reads a blog or another piece of social content and interacts with it. I think that is all something that all builds brand equity. And that actually doesn't cost, or some of that does not cost anything. And so I think you really, as marketers, we have this responsibility to weigh outcomes and outputs with creativity in order to really break through.
Yeah, that's great. And then Martin, I think, coming from somebody outside of the industry, right? I would love to hear from you. How does the messaging from these three resonate and compare outside the industry versus maybe differing from your expectations in terms of the clients you're working with across different sectors?
Yeah, I think it's amazing that you all are able to be such great marketers as just humans. It's actually amazing that I'm astounded. I remember even in the prep for this this webinar, just hearing how thoughtfully you all were actually using marketing in every facet of your business, and like you all are these AI brains that we're trying to help augment. But from our perspective, and what we're hearing across industries, as well as especially in finance and other highly regulated areas that really care about privacy, especially, we're really seeing AI can be an equalizer. I think one thing that is very common is that marketing is an immensely important business role. It basically ties together every facet of the business, and it is very under-resourced. And it is also one of the most important drivers for long-term growth. I know that all these, I'm sure, I really appreciated Lynn's perspective just now when she was saying how, everyone wants to be this household name, right? Everyone wants to be the company. And that takes a lot of time and resources. But there are these kind of like micro moments where, whether it's a rebrand, like Katie was talking about, or big shifts like going public, like Keryce, AI can actually help inject control for the marketing team in each of these moments in a way that is actually still consistent. So one of the things we've seen folks be excited about is being able to tie together all of these campaigns to a central narrative that you as the marketing team can actually control, while still being hand in hand with promotional efforts or people in booths or your sales and BD team, especially with account-based marketing, as Lynn and others were saying, is critical today.
Yeah, no, that was really great from the panel. And I'm curious, in my perspective, I think everyone shares the same thing, right? Like there's a balance between ABM, hyper-targeted, I want to reach these three people at these three companies because they're the only people that are going to buy our services, versus becoming an echo chamber, right? Where we're going to the same conferences, speaking to the same people, saying the same things. And now, from Katie's perspective, you have to balance industry from being a private company and raising rounds versus Lynn and Keryce, where now, you guys are public companies. Maybe there's a retail investor aspect of it, or bring on larger institutions. So I'm curious, to hear how you guys approach not getting insulated, or maybe you say, hey, look, we focus on the product, we focus on our particular accounts that we want to sell to, and the rest will follow. So Keryce, I'll let you kind of kick that off.
Yeah, I think a lot of that balance comes from us having an understanding of who our customer is and where they are. So, especially when you consider how long our sales cycles are in this industry, thinking that, okay, we want to work with this customer to be servicing in 2028, we have to be signed in 2026. So what are we saying now to get them there? And having a really honest conversation with our business development team about what that customer journey looks like and how we're telling that story from when they're part of that broader audience, not necessarily focused on Astroscale just yet, how we're feeding them information about what we do, the services that we offer, the value to them, getting them into our funnel and then ultimately into our pipeline. It's really how we balance that. So just kind of looking at the journey from the very beginning to when they're kind of just in the ether, not sure what value Astroscale has for them, and take an honest look at all the touch points that we have with them, all the way through to the point where we would be creating custom or ABM focused content for that specific customer. It's kind of how we balance between that hyper focus and then the broader reach. So it really is a matter of aligning really our comms plan that is at that higher level with our marketing plan that comes into play lower down the funnel when we have a better idea of what we can offer a very specific customer.
Yeah, great. And Katie, would love to hear your thoughts on this too.
Yeah, I think one thing that I have noticed, especially in the space industry, is that we talk a lot about what the technology does, but we don't talk a lot about what the outcomes are or what is enabled by the technology. And I think it's it's normal, I think, when you are spending a lot of time on research and development to say, oh, we do this. Oh, this is really cool that we can do this. But that, I think, puts you squarely in talking about yourself versus talking about what your customer needs. And so what I'm excited about and what I think we are starting to see a shift to in the industry, and I think this is what drives the impact and what drives conversations forward, is what is the outcome for the customer? What are you able to achieve by using our infrastructure or our service? And I think that is an area, that is a evolution that we are starting to see as an industry. That is really important. I think I feel like I mentioned this a lot, but my background is really in the more tech SaaS industry. But one of the areas, because you don't have a real tangible product to touch, like flight hardware, is because you're focused on services, you actually have to think about what are the outcomes of those services, and you market based on outcomes. And that's where a lot of B2B marketing is focused. And so applying pieces of that playbook to the space industry, I think will help us as marketers as a whole. And then also win people over. This goes back to kind of what Lynn was saying about becoming household names. You don't see space companies really buying Super Bowl ad space, but what you do, and I think this was 2021, is I remember Salesforce bought that ad that was talking about how we're focused on Earth, not on space. And that was pretty provocative, but it talked about what the outcome was. And I think that actually was galvanizing for a lot of people when they were thinking about what space was for. And it certainly shifted sentiment in a particular direction. And so what I think the opportunity is actually for space to kind of paint that picture of what's possible. And then granted, the caveat or the asterisk there too is that we are in a very regulated industry and we have to be careful about forward-looking statements, but there is a way to thread that needle.
Yeah, great. And Lynn, would I know you kind of touched on this in your first answer, but would love for you to expand on it if you have anything.
Yeah, I think we're in violent agreement here that we as an industry need to shift to more so what, and be prepared to have a speeds and feeds conversation all day long with a really hyper technical audience who wants to know that. But if I think about investors and even customers at different stages in the buying cycle, they want to know how our offering is going to help them. They want to know how we're going to answer a question that solves sort of a need they have. And so what we've been really focused on is, like, as a marketing team, how do we package the so what into whether they're like interesting insights or observations that then actually show them value, where they can actually use our space-based intelligence so we stay top of mind. So it's a bit of shifting the position of, like, here's my product to here's how I can uniquely help you solve a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. That was great. And I think, we got a question actually already about long sales cycles. And I think while we're on the topic, we could touch on it. Something that has interested me is that, you guys battle really long sales cycles, and in a traditional marketing landscape, ideally, not that this happens in other industries either, but ideally sales and marketing is coordinating consistently on how can marketing constantly drive demand to add more clients to the pipeline to when, your salespeople could then close deals, where here it's, you might add someone to the pipeline and it might take, 18 months to close that deal or sign that contract. And so I'm curious to hear from you guys, not necessarily the strategies of that, but how you manage long sales cycles and say, okay, we had a big sprint here. We're not going to wait 18 months to have more marketing messaging. So Katie, would love to hear your thoughts there.
Ooh, that's a good question. I think it again focuses on the pain points that the customer has right away, right? It's what are they trying to do? And so kind of part of our value at Loft is that we say we are fast and simple. We're kind of taking a different approach to how the industry has traditionally kind of has created programs and gotten people to space. And then I think as you take people down the funnel, it's really important to understand and listen to those conversations and understand why, like, there are objections, understand who you might be competing against if you are competing against anyone. And I think then providing these updates too. I think the other area that I think about a lot that is kind of a theme in our strategy is excellent execution. What are the very real things that we are showing that we are doing that kind of advance our narrative every day? And so whether that is customers that are happy and that have successfully flown a mission with us, really honing in on their stories and using that as kind of a proof point in our sales cycle, honing in on advancements or kind of updates. So I think talking about, we just mentioned a new JV in the UAE. And I think that's a really exciting moment for us. And that's an important milestone that shows that we are taking our playbook internationally. But we have this playbook and we know that it is starting to work. We're starting to produce satellites at scale. And so kind of balancing the two with both the overall kind of company execution and kind of thinking about those brand touch points, as well as handling the specific pain points of a customer. That I think is what helps accelerate cycles. That said, though, some people may not be ready, and it's always hard. It's always hard to know and time these things exactly, but preparing and providing kind of the correct material certainly does help. Measurement is another conversation, and I think we could probably talk about attribution all day. And it's something we're constantly trying to figure out and draw those kind of clean lines too. I don't think the lines are very clean. I think they're very squiggly. But it's certainly something, especially in our industry, that is worth thinking about too, that I think we can punt to a later question or conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Lynn, for Blacksky, right, one of your, I think, core values, maybe not necessarily defined, but I think something that is within Blacksky is, rapid decision making for fast action. Does that mean that the sales cycles are shorter and you guys can pounce on opportunities more consistently, or are you still battling those same issues of getting a customer lined up and waiting an undisclosed amount of time to bring them in to then be able to provide rapid, decision making and rapid, intelligence?
Yeah, I think for the most part, especially when we look at our focus areas in defense and intelligence and think about the agencies behind a defense and intelligence customer, they're typically massive, filled with bureaucracy in different stages. And so we're hearing from our customers that they need sort of fast, focused, and flexible data in a myriad of ways. Those procurement cycles still take 12 to 18 months, especially for larger customers. But what we've done, because we are software first, is we've lowered the barrier to entry. And so we are seeing a lot of customers that will come in initially in times of crisis or need, where they need low latency, rapid revisit to react to something. And when we have those opportunities, we are able to bring those customers on within 24 hours and train people on our platform that's web-based to start to get those answers. But realistically, I think we are still battling these really long sales cycles, which then from a marketing team means we always need to be around for marketing and sales for when the customers are ready. So we stay top of mind even when it's not in time of crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Keryce, Astroscale recently demonstrated your fly around observations for space debris, which is great. So talk to me about how that affects your marketing when, you guys are starting to demonstrate, right? Getting closer to being able to act on these contracts. But again, as a marketer, right, you have to think 12 months, 18 months, 24 months in advance. So how are you kind of battling those two things of, hey, we need to capitalize on the news now versus, kind of what Katie and Lynn were saying, where, we need to still be talking about what's coming next, what's in the future, what we're planning to do for, our customers now and our customers, that we sign contracts for later on.
Yeah, it's been a huge benefit actually. So at Astroscale, we kind of have an added challenge of marketing an emerging market. So we have a limited set of customers we can sell servicing satellites to, and only so many of them fully understand what on-orbit servicing is and the value of being able to service a satellite while it's in orbit. So the long sales cycle is kind of inevitable because there is a level of education that we're doing with our customers about what we can do. And sometimes we're educating them on the problems that they have. They're not even aware until we identify them for them. So the long sales cycle is inevitable when we have that element of education, and having the action behind what we do with something like Astroscale on orbit showing what we do so we don't have to tell is a huge benefit. So we can point to Astroscale and the pictures that it's capturing of debris in space right now, and use that to really formalize in people's heads what we can offer them, as opposed to just kind of nebulous vision and kind of helping them shape things in their head. They don't have to imagine anymore. Like, we're doing things, they're in orbit, and we can point to them. And so being able to come back to something tangible to present in their heads and help them shape the value that we'll have for them and the type of servicing we can do for them is a huge benefit. But I definitely would agree with what Lynn and Katie shared in terms of making sure that we're top of mind for our customer through this sales cycle, capitalizing on engagements. I'm also new to the space industry. It's been a year for me, and I was so surprised by how much in-person engagements can really drive pipelines in this industry. So really maximizing on every opportunity you have to talk to a prospect or a customer, and then continuing to keep those lines of communication open. So while you're still in the sales cycle process, you're also giving them an idea of who they're going to be working with. What are the soft skills that they're going to get from working out of a company like Astroscale? For us, we're really invested in building solutions that are for our customer. We're listening to our customer and delivering on their pain points and their needs, and just instilling that through something as simple as an in-person engagement with prospects allow us to continue to validate that as we get closer and closer to a contract signing.
Yeah. And then Martin, hearing from the panelists, I'm curious how, Pluto 5000 and AI Brain, right, could help assist with those touch points, and how AI in general is going to start shifting where, maybe it's less of a strain on the marketers and on the sales team, and more of a help from these added tools like yours. So curious your thoughts around customer engagement and those type of things, where maybe then the marketers could shift their focus to higher priority items.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. And yeah, everyone, obviously, you're all such great marketers. It's definitely an honor to be on this panel and hear from you all directly. I think one thing that's really exciting with AI, and particularly, I'll try not to talk about our product too much. I think also Katie's point about saying about customer outcomes is really important. And so I think where we really see the AI Brain helping folks in the market today is around creating those delightful experiences while driving quantitative insights without having to really think about it. Because you all, from even the conversation so far, there's already so much you have to do. You always need to be around, as Lynn was saying, and you have to always maximize engagement, as Keryce was saying, and you have to still figure out attribution at the end of the day. That's like a really important piece, as Katie was mentioning. And we can do that now. That as I was saying earlier, AI really is an equalizer. It's very new. So some of the technology we're working with was not possible a year ago. It just wasn't. Like, you could have built it, but it would have been ridiculously expensive using an older machine learning bench, or even smaller models. So today, one of the things we just launched is just called Interaction Insights, and it just helps folks not have to deal with parsing through metrics. You can actually figure out what people want in all of these different verticals, especially as we're hearing more and more marketers in space and also in other industries really focusing on their website as not just an awareness play, it is a consideration play too. And AI really unlocks a new dimension for you all as marketers to control those experiences in a new way, especially as, I'm a nerd and I'm biased, but a lot of people like buying things and getting information online. And so there really is this new area where, mixed with AI and privacy especially, you can comply with regulations and also provide this new space for your stakeholders to learn and evolve with your business. And you can actually feed your AI brain can actually change the content that those people are seeing in real time and over time, and give you back those insights without actually having to, go through reams of data to figure out, 51% of users might like this. It actually just upvotes things, for example. So too much and too deep about our product, I apologize, but that's a quick teaser.
Yeah, that's great. I think that actually ties in perfectly with my next question. So, in an industry that's really been dominated for probably the last, 50 to 100 years on in-person engagements, conferences are still such a huge part of all of our lives in the industry. And, I think predominantly leadership views them as marketing, right? Like, we're going to buy a booth and we're going to be one of the top sponsors, and we're going to have our name on the poster with 50 other companies that are also here and spending money. And I think, I'm curious to hear from you all how your strategy has changed, how you're convincing leadership to take a different approach, whether that's digital, whether that's creating more meaningful experiences at in-person events, and really trying to modernize the marketing practices of the industry to which extent you can, because there is such still a large portion of the industry that is handshaking, deal making in person. So, Lynn, would love to hear from you how you've done that at Blacksky and your previous roles as well.
Yeah, I think we have to continue to bridge the gap. Every company I've worked at in this industry is so events focused to some extent. And every marketer or every marketing leader that comes in has the sentiment of like, we're going to do less events because there are so many more modern marketing strategies and tactics that we can implement. And I think it's both. Our industry is so deeply, deeply rooted in face-to-face interaction, and that will never go away. And as marketers, we need to harness and treat events as moments in time. And I think about them as like a stake in the ground. What are all of the marketing activities, PR activities, and activations that can happen leading up to and following an event that are much more in the sphere of the types of tactics that we all want to use that we know are effective, whether it's, driving impressions around awareness or measuring engagement, etc. And then having those really physical moments in time be like the fireworks in the middle of something, but then not building a marketing program that's always sort of peaks and valleys based on events. So you use them as the stakes in the ground to then do really other sophisticated and maybe more impactful in certain ways around the events. I think that's how I've seen the most success, because we are a deep-rooted person-to-person industry, and I don't see that going away.
Yeah, absolutely. And shameless plug, if you want to modernize your marketing, reach out to Payload. We have plenty of things to do. No, that's great. And curious to hear your thoughts, being new, in the younger generation like myself, right? I'm sure you had your own ideas about modernizing Astroscale's marketing strategies. So yeah, curious how you've kind of approached that in your first year there.
Oh, 100%. And I completely agree with Lynn. It's about a balance. I've come from SaaS companies where if you didn't have 50 PDFs on your site behind a form and 75 webinars, there's no way you're getting through to sales. And for better or worse, I can't say I miss that, but I do see how there is a need for balance between those valuable in-person exchanges that are so touted in the industry. And then, like Lynn said, building an ecosystem around it, building out different channels around it. So when we're gearing up for presence at an engagement, what content can we direct people to, and let them know, hey, we're going to be talking about this at this engagement. Ask this person from our BD team about this specific mission. So kind of training our audience almost in how to have conversations with us at engagements. And then what that follow-up is from there. Are we putting QR codes in our booth design to direct people to other assets? What videos are we putting in our booths? When we have in-person engagements with specific customers, how are we equipping them with something as simple as a one-pager, so they can walk away and feel very informed about who Astroscale is, what we're doing, what we can offer, ultimately so they remember us. So it's really about thinking about all the channels and opportunities you have to create touch points with customers, and having that balance of consistency too. The more a prospect sees your brand, sees your name, sees news about you, they're gonna remember you and come back to you when they identify a problem for you to solve or a way for you to help them. So it really is about thinking about events as just one channel in a suite of channels where you can engage with your customers, but creating more of a balance so you're not just hyper focused on an event and engagements.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, credit to you all. We've all had conversations in the past. And I think, what stands out is every time I talk to you, Katie, when you're talking about payload events and space conferences, you're always looking for kind of like that edge or unique activation that would stand out for, the customers you want to speak to. So I'm curious to hear from you, besides payload events, when you go to conferences, how do you guys try to stand out and then, similarly bridge that gap between, the in-person conference versus, the other touch points before and after?
Are there other events besides payload events?
No, not that I know of.
Just had to check there really quickly. But that's a good question, and I +2 to what both Lynn and Keryce just said, because that is exactly the way, like, I think we need to be thinking about these kinds of things. While my team is called marketing, we kind of are this blanket. Marketing is kind of this blanket name for like this kind of growing integrated group of like brand, PR, product marketing, customer marketing, kind of bringing all those things into one area. And so when you have an event like the example I use actually is SmallSat, because we were just there. There are a lot of different elements, different touch points that all of those different areas of focus can contribute to. And so at SmallSat, we had a booth, which is kind of your more traditional marketing channel. But then we also included kind of product marketing elements for our sales team there. We had a brand presence. We hosted a party and we were super stoked about that party. I think we had like 500 people there, which was really exciting to see. And so we kind of create that experience, but we think about this in an integrated, it's important to think about this in an integrated way, because you never know who you're going to be talking to. For example, I think we met a bunch of great candidates who were interested in working at Loft that came to our event. And so while it is obviously sales are very important, I think the people at the company are also important. And so what are the touch points that you are creating for each of those specific audiences are really driven by an integrated team. And so I think the other piece too is our team partners really closely with our people team as well. That's another kind of piece that I would not discount, because I think I don't want to go too far into this, but I truly believe that your kind of internal comms and your people are some of your strongest marketing assets. And so by activating your team and enabling them with that content, they actually represent your brand and your company. And to some extent too, part of your sales, some of your sales conversations, just as much as more traditional marketing materials too.
Yeah, that's great. And I think something that, again, probably deserves its own webinar, but I think the recruiting angle is really interesting. I think it goes back to our earlier point about how, we spoke about, getting broader versus ABM, and something that people don't consider, right, is when you're integrated and you're only focused on your accounts, there's a whole other aspect of recruiting that is a big issue in the industry. And I think that that's where your marketing can help serve that messaging, not to only future customers, but future employees, both from a lower level employee all the way up to, your senior C-suite. Martin, I want to ask, because it's something that I don't really know much about either, right? Like AI is all focused on ChatGPT and Perplexity and all these tools you need to access via your computer and your phone. And I'm curious, how have you seen AI kind of bridge the gap between online and in person, especially considering space that, again, everyone's mentioned in person is so important? How could people be leveraging AI for in person? Is it just an ideas tool for content at the event, or is there other applications that people aren't thinking of?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think one of the biggest opportunities, again, back to that kind of equalization, is also bridging this online and offline experience. The same way that it's really important to manage between like segmenting the markets, whether it's broad versus specific ABM versus for recruiting versus for investors, that can actually be extended. We've seen that a couple of folks have expressed a lot of interest using our technology to actually put like QR codes that drive to specific custom online experiences. And then the system is able to remember the context of where the people met the team in person. And so the online experience on your website, for example, our AI and the way that the technology is now able to work is you can actually curate a really meaningful journey for people, regardless of kind of where they came from. And so being able to like tie back, we met you at this conference, and then have your experience actually change online and offline based on that, is definitely where we're seeing the most salient use, and feeding all of that back to insights. So again, rather than being like, 51% of people who went to this conference like this book, it will actually say, we think you should make an educational webinar or series on this particular thing that people have been asking for. And you can do that in a privacy respecting way. And so it really allows for market segmentation online and offline in a way that actually remembers who people are and can build this kind of digital relationship with a person that doesn't just get disconnected whenever they meet someone from your team in person.
Yeah, I need that for myself. I can't embarrassingly say how many people I've introduced myself twice to in this industry. Too many names. But yeah, no, that's great. So let's talk about some trends, right? And I think something that, Katie, I think you mentioned earlier about, leveraging marketing without necessarily meaning spending money, right? There's a few trends going on. I think, us at Payload and a ton of other companies have really embraced leveraging social for your own promotion and talking about the industry and kind of like your CEO creator. What trends are you leveraging at your company? What's something that maybe you are trying to get your company to embrace that maybe they haven't necessarily latched onto? And where do you think some of the gaps that could be filled by, again, these trends that we're seeing across other industries that space hasn't been participating in so far? So Keryce, I'll start with you.
I think the one area we're really trying to expand as a team is the value of content marketing. It's something that I've seen from other industries I've worked in, as I mentioned before, with the plethora of ebooks I've had to work on. But as much as we've talked about the balance between engagements and other channels, I really see opportunities for the industry to really hone in on how we utilize content for education, for engagement, helping people understand a lot of what we talked about in terms of thinking about the future, road mapping visions, because so much of that is necessary for us to market the type of servicing that we do. So not just content marketing, but helping internal teams understand that content is a lot more than social media, that there are other ways that you can attract audiences besides LinkedIn. I think that's another channel I've seen a hyper focus in that I was taken aback by. Understand, but also, I see opportunities for teams in this industry to understand that there are so many other ways to engage through content outside of something like social media. So utilizing video in unique ways, utilizing written content in unique ways. So we're educating prospects on who we are, the value that we can offer. And kind of coming back to what we were saying about that balance between engagements and other touch points, that's a great way to continue keeping yourself top of mind with prospects through these other channels, following up with prospects in these longer sales cycles and saying, hey, we just published this new report. Have you taken a look at this? I think this would be relevant to you. The conversation we had reminded me of this section of this blog post that we just did. So utilizing content marketing as a sales tool is something that I'm really excited to experiment with and hope to see a little bit more in the industry.
Yeah, that's great. And Katie, is Loft buying a ton of billboards? Are you guys trying, offbeat different trends, things that you might not necessarily see your run-of-the-mill space company participate in?
I not to be super controversial, but I don't know that a billboard is anywhere in our future. We're based in San Francisco, and you have that stretch of 101. Every single AI company has bought a billboard there, and I think it might work for their audiences. I don't think that's the right move for us. That being said, though, I think there are two trends that stick out in my head. One, creator partnerships. So working with people who have a voice in the industry and distilling your message and working with them to tell your story. Well, we haven't done that at Loft necessarily. At another space company I was at, we did do a marketing partnership to live stream our launches. And it was really fun. And it was also really scary because we had to be somewhat comfortable with giving up control of what people were seeing. But that said, it did help with building credibility. And so I think that is something that is really scary for a highly regulated industry like the space industry. I think it's even 2 times, maybe more scary when you are like a publicly traded company. But being able to kind of put guardrails around it too, I think the ROI there is incredible. And it actually is not a significant, or the spend there is not what you think it would be. And so I think there is opportunity to double click into that and spend a lot more time thinking about how you are helping other people tell your story. The second one is actually AI. So again, we would be remiss if we didn't talk more about using AI here. I think for now, we really use it internally. I think there are kind of 3 levels. And using ChatGPT or Claude or Bard, I think the first level is one, using it as an editor. My team is 3 people. We have to edit ourselves. We have to we have to proofread our own work. And just putting information through or putting a piece of copy through and saying, hey, can you look at this and copy edit it for me, has been pretty helpful. And that gets you, I think, like 80 to 90% confidence that what you're working on is good. I do not think it should generate your whole piece of content. You still need to do that, but it is a helpful co-pilot. The second level of that is actually using AI for like pattern matching or identifying themes. And so if you get a bunch of news coverage or earned coverage, for example, can you put it through Claude or put it through something else and ask Claude to identify the themes or kind of messages that resonate, to understand if your message is kind of coming through in a way that is useful. And conversely, before you put information out there, can you use that for messaging consistency? So those are 2 ways I've used it. Level 3, I still need to spend more time on, but like, can you build an LLM using code to help you with generating something or identifying the best time for content? I haven't put a lot of time into this, but this is something that I think about in the back of my head of how, as marketers and how smaller teams, how we can be more efficient and work smarter, not harder.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it ties perfectly into the AI discussion. And unfortunately, I think we need a conference level amount of time to expand on this whole conversation because this has been great. But Lynn, I'm curious to hear from you. You guys work a lot with the intelligence base and certainly, raises, security concerns at an even higher level than most space companies. And so I'm curious, have you guys been able to leverage AI tools, and what's kind of been the reaction there internally?
Yeah, it's interesting because we use AI tools every day in our business for things like object detection, pattern detection, etc. And so thinking about how we are a software first company, I think AI is very much within our DNA tied to products and services. And it is very much in a controlled environment that is a place where our customers know the data's right, the data's safe, the data's encrypted, etc. So I think in our DNA as a business, AI is there. It's just kind of table stakes. And where we're pivoting to and evolving as a business is it would be really beneficial to use AI tools for like baseline technical understanding. So we're, let's say, creating content from an educated place. And even things like AI note takers to save time when we're interviewing folks to make sure that we're capturing key themes or distilling information that is really like in audience friendly language. We don't do that today. And part of the reason we don't do it is not because we're scared of AI. It's because a lot of the content that we are starting with is sensitive information. And so a lot of what my team, the humans on my team, spend time doing is taking something that might be Blacksky proprietary or customer sensitive and translating that into something that we can scale and use as use cases. And so right now that is, I won't say it's even human in the loop work. It is human driven work because we have this sort of integral piece in the middle where we have to make sure that we are protecting sensitive information.
Yeah.
Which a lot of like large language models, or you can't put a bunch of proprietary info into ChatGPT and hope no one's looking at the data that we're feeding into it, because fundamentally that's not why those systems are built the way they are. So I think for us, as more secure tools come online, similar to what Martin's talking about, that's really a place where we will be able to play, because we will be able to convince folks like my CIO that there's a tremendous amount of data security in those types of tools that then we can leverage differently.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm curious, I'll end it here before we jump into Q&A. I'm curious how you guys have been leveraging AI tools in your marketing and even internally beyond marketing.
Yeah, I think Lynn touched on a lot of the restrictions that we have around utilizing AI. So it really is a matter of getting the most that we can out of the freedom that we do have to use it. So apart from content generation and QA, like Lynn and Katie mentioned, it's really been beneficial for our research and discovery phases. So what insights we can extract from what's out there, competitive analysis, social listening, things that we can take advantage of without giving away too much of our secret sauce and being very particular about how we're phrasing our prompts. But we've gotten a lot of really interesting insights just from the responses we get about Astroscale or about our competitors or about our customers, and utilizing that to make sure that we're being honest about ourselves. You know, we have one perception of ourselves in-house, but doesn't match what external audiences are saying about us. So that's one way we've been able to utilize AI within the restrictions that we have when it comes to security and privacy without needing something custom for us. So that's been a really exciting benefit of even like a chat GPT.
Yeah, no, that's great. And thanks again, everybody, for your really thoughtful answers. I'm going to do a quick Q&A. We went a little longer than I anticipated, but I think two questions I'm going to combine together. So aside from the companies on this call, are there any space tech companies whose marketing efforts you really admire? And then additionally, are there any in-person events, conferences that really stand out to your mind as being successful? So I will let one of you start. I don't want to put pressure on anybody to answer first. But maybe Katie, I'll let you. I know you usually have some good, strong opinions on things.
Strong opinions loosely held.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm lucky to be on this call with Lynn and Keryce because I think they are both obviously crushing it. And so it's great to see them. In terms of other companies, I personally like to look outside of the space industry. I think, we can learn a lot from how even like consumer companies connect with their audiences. One brand that sticks out in my mind always, or one company that sticks out in my mind always, is Patagonia. And I know this is probably pretty common for marketers, but I think it's something that you see. It's also something that you experience. If you have like a fleece from there and it starts to rip, you take it in and they fix it. And to me, that is the brand experience that you want to be known for. People know that you're consistent and reliable. So I think they do an awesome job. The other one that is kind of my niche, kind of nerdy fixation is actually Trader Joe's. They are not going to be your most like sophisticated brand, but I think the amount of user generated content that they inspire is incredible. They basically have there's like an entire cottage industry of people just making stuff with Trader Joe's items. And I like think about that a lot of like, people are so excited about what your brand or what your company offers that they are creating their own content about that. And that to me feels like a really cool way to think about what people are doing, or what company, or like basically what you are doing is working.
Yeah. And any conferences you really love that you want to shout out?
Besides Payload?
Oh yeah. Investor Summit's coming up, everybody.
Gosh, I err towards smaller conferences at this point in time. There are like some groups that I'm a part of for like marketing and for comms, and they do like mini cons or conferences, which is like 100 people. And for me, I see a lot more value in the smaller ones versus the big ones that everybody is at and that are super noisy. So that would maybe be my, like, on my wish list for the space industry, is figuring out how we can create more kind of focused spaces for those important conversations.
Yeah, that's great. Keryce, do you have any brands in or outside of the space industry that you really admire from a marketing perspective?
Yeah, so interestingly, I do also kind of look outside the industry. Being from outside the industry and just kind of thinking of ways to be creative. And Spotify is one that stands out in my mind. The company's adaptability to their listeners, how they started doing those yearly wrap-ups of what listeners are listening to, because they recognize that, okay, people are sharing the songs that they're listening to, and people actually want data that's introspective about who they are. You know, we're looking at horoscopes to see like, well, I'm a Cancer rising, so this is why I listen to this. So just like having that really intimate idea of who their customer is, and then shaping their offering and having just little things to delight them outside of simply listening to music is really insightful. And then again, just little things that delight customers, like having audiobooks that they don't have to pay for if you're premium. So just thinking about what would my customer want out of a service like this are things that we kind of keep in the back of our heads that we can apply even to a company like Astroscale. And then when it comes to servicing, interestingly, I've been looking at Monday.com and how they offer a various level of services for different needs. I've been really inspired by how they shape that in a way that's not overwhelming. For a company like ours that has different levels of services that we can offer customers that they can shape for their needs, it can get really overwhelming to present that. So looking at how they organize their offerings has been really helpful in a lot of the strategy work that we've been doing lately. In terms of engagements, I think as a newcomer, I did like the really splashy Space Symposium experience that I had. So I'll lean in and go for the cliche one. But just seeing all the activations there and getting to interact with different companies, I think especially as a newcomer, was really exciting for me. But completely agree that the more intimate engagements are valuable. But for year one, I loved Space Symposium.
You're going to get a lot of experienced marketers with pitchforks outside of your door for that answer, for sure.
I'll take it. I'll accept it.
Lynn, how about you? What are some space or non-space brands that you really admire?
It's funny. I think companies that are not in space who market about space do a way better job than we do. I think about there's like, and I think I posted it on LinkedIn, there was this Lego ad, and it was a man in a spacesuit, and it was so stinking compelling. And so everyone else talks about us like we're cool, we're sexy, we're innovative, we're fast, we do all these things. And then we're so insular and we talk about just the facts, ma'am. So I think everyone who talks about us does a way better job than we do. For brands outside the industry, I would have never said this 2 months ago, but I am Team Barbie. I never played with a Barbie in my entire life. I was anti-Barbie. I hated the color. I watched the Barbie movie and I had this epiphany. And then I went down this rabbit hole around Barbie, and Barbie's done a whole bunch of work about the dream gap. And the dream gap is basically like from when girls are little, they're inherently put a gap between girls and boys and how they grow up and what they want to be, because we teach you that there's a dream gap that exists. And so I took Barbie, which I never cared about for a moment in my life. I had all the feelings for the movie, and now I've gone down this rabbit hole. And I actually think that brand carries so much impact to so many people, but it still has a lot of work to do to break in. Like, they haven't nailed it, because there are people with all these perceptions that fundamentally Barbie is so skewed that it is giving us body dysmorphia. So I like them because they've done a lot of work. And I also like them because they show that even in a highly successful brand, there is so much stinking work to do.
Yeah, I think I'm hearing that we need a small satellite manufacturing movie coming to blockbuster theaters in the next couple of years. No, that's great. And then Martin, to close out, I know we're a little over time. Would love to hear a brand you really admire, outside of the ones on this call.
Oh yeah, well I was going to say Payload, of course, but no, I think it's amazing. I think all the companies here are certainly going to be household names eventually, which is awesome. I would say it's kind of cliche probably, but I am a fan of SpaceX just for helping, like, actually help with launch. I think having building more access for companies is pretty great. And the more B2B piece, Acquired. I'm a really big fan of the Acquired podcast. I've been consuming a lot lately. And I think the way that they're kind of, as just everyone was mentioning on panel too, like they're like VCs, and like they're analyzing and kind of giving their perspectives. And I think it's kind of good piece around how important engagement really is, but also building out universes for your stakeholders.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. Thank you to the panelists. You guys did a great job. Check them all out. They're doing great work in the industry. Thank you to all of our attendees. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please don't email me if you didn't. It will make me feel bad. And otherwise, hope everyone has a great week. And thanks again for tuning in.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, everyone. See you.
Bye.